This is a revised version of our initial results overview for Farsight's Time Cross project. After we published the initial version of our results overview for the period from May through August 2016, we came across new information supplied by the Russian Ministry of Defense about one of the targets for August. And this new information forced us to re-examine the remote viewing data for that month, confirming the accuracy of the remote viewing. Now, it is clear that the results are an absolute hit for August. Since our August episode was the most complex and controversial so far, I will discuss that later in this video. This project has our remote viewers perceiving newsworthy events a month in advance. If you have not yet seen the theory or overview videos that explain the project, you really need to do that. This project is way more complicated than most people think, and those videos are really essential to understanding the nature of the project. The overly simple version is that we have a target pool that lists major news events that are reported by 4 major news outlets each month. Then we weigh the events in the pool by how many links those outlets give to the events for related stories. Now, the more links, the more coverage, and the more newsworthy the story. The top stories are our targets, and it is possible for one viewer to describe one story while another viewer describes another story. It is not possible to isolate one and only one target from a pool of targets with remote viewing due to what is called a lack of independence within the target pool. This is a well-known phenomenon with remote viewing, but we attempt to control this as much as possible by using our weighting scheme so that the viewers primarily perceive the top-weighted stories. Now, we had an early experiment in May 2016 that helped us set up our project. Now, during that month, the big stories were the crash of Egypt Air Flight 804 and the 1.2 million acre fire that occurred in Canada, the so-called 2016 Fort McMurray wildfire that displaced upwards of 80,000 people. Now, our project procedures were not fully fleshed out at that time, and we initially were not going to publish anything for that month. But Daz Smith's session so clearly described the crash of Egypt Air Flight 804, well, we simply could not resist. The session even gave me goosebumps, and I'm used to this kind of stuff. Dick Allgaier had an interesting session describing the Canadian wildfire, but again, we were still setting up the project, and we decided to focus on publishing the new stuff that had the experimental rules more firmly in place. So we never published a video for that one. So far, we have been lucky in that each month has had a different sort of dominating news theme. Starting with June 2016, there were terror events. Then, political upheaval in the streets in July in both the United States and Britain. And then in August, there was an earthquake in Italy and a huge escalation in the war in Syria. So, we can evaluate how we did by looking at the differences in the results from month to month. Different months have very different big-ticket news items, and our remote viewing sessions should reflect the changes in the themes of those news items. June 2016 had 2 dominating news events, both ISIS-related terror attacks. There was the bombing of the Istanbul airport and the Pulse nightclub attack in Orlando, Florida. Both Daz Smith and Dick Allgaier described terror attacks. Based on their descriptions, all recorded live on video, it was clear that Daz Smith focused on the Istanbul airport bombing while Dick Allgaier described the Orlando attack. Now, we have videos that point all this out in considerable detail for each session on Farsight's website in the Time Cross section. But again, clear hits, all done the month before the events actually happened. June had terror events dominating the news, and that is exactly what we got with remote viewing. Another way of saying this is that we were able to tell people at the end of May that June would be a month with major terror attacks.
Now inside, again, it feels very angular, but spacious. There feels like there's some verticals moving outwards. These could be stairs or something here. And it feels like there's a central plaza type area with other smaller structures and areas around this. And within this central public area there are people, life. And within this area, this is where this kind of event type thing happens. There's a flash. White, blinding flash, instantaneous flash comes out of nowhere. Then a few seconds, no, not seconds, milliseconds later, it feels like a lot to me because I can slow it down. White flash, really bright, blinding white light. Then a split moment of time later, this big wave of destructive energy pushes outwards. Destroying everything, moving everything within its wake, really. As I say, I can literally see the muscle and tissues on people's body ripple with the effect of this push, move forward with intensity.
Now, the next month, July 2016, was filled with political upheaval in the streets. That month was one of the most newsworthy months in a long time. There were lots of race-related demonstrations in the United States and Brexit-related repercussions in the United Kingdom. It seemed that just about every day something new was happening. Both Dick Allgeier and Princess Jeanne focused on the demonstrations in the streets in the United States. Princess's session was particularly clear in describing essentially nonviolent political demonstrations of the sort that dominated that month, while Dick Allgeier's session included some of the violent elements that occurred during that month as well. Now, in Britain, there were lots of demonstrations following the Brexit vote to leave the European Union, and as Smith appears to have clearly narrowed in on the consequent resignation of Prime Minister Cameron. So the month of July was filled with political upheaval, and that is exactly what our remote viewers described. Then on to August 2016, one of our most controversial episodes. Two things dominated the news in August: the war in Syria and the earthquake in Italy. With respect to the war in Syria, to give you some comparison, there were nearly no links to the war in our major news outlets during the month of July. But then, in August, there was a huge escalation of the war, primarily due to the Russian bombing campaign and the invasion of Syria by Turkey. The total number of story links for the war across all of the 4 news outlets used in the project passed 100 in August. Now, for the earthquake in Italy, the total number of links was greater than 80. Now, the Syria and Italy events were different in a crucial respect. The earthquake was a sudden thing that spanned a brief period of time, but the war activities extended over the entire month, with each new happening pushing the last element off of the headlines. That's just the way wars work. But in terms of the real estate on the news web pages, there was a huge investment in the war during August. Most of the war activity involved conflicts in urban areas, often where aerial bombings devastated major urban areas, and in many respects the earthquake and the war had similarities, especially in the destruction of buildings. The similarities initially confused some of us as well, thinking that perhaps everyone was describing the same event. The major difference is in how those buildings were destroyed. In retrospect, this is now easy to see, but everything is easy to see in retrospect. Now, starting with the session by Daz Smith, Daz unambiguously describes what appears to be an earthquake. He even mentions the word earthquake in his paper session, which is available on Farsight's website. He describes absolutely no war-related activities, no aerial bombings, no attacking forces, just trembling and crashing down of buildings.
So, in summary, this feels like it's going to be a surprise event in an urban city-like location that happens unexpectedly, and there's lots of sound, noise, vibration, which seems to affect a structure or multiple structures, but mainly there's a primary structure that I'm focused upon for some reason. This structure then is changed in shape and form. There's a great downwards movement. It's partly demolished and collapses. There's a great sense of loss of life, death and destruction. Lots of carnage, mess, noise, dust. A real catastrophic event in an urban location, it feels like, that involves multiple structures and great loss of life.
On the other hand, Princess Genet unambiguously describes wartime activities in her session. She clearly describes how these wartime activities result from aerial attacks on armed forces on the ground in a dry urban environment with little foliage. The attacks cause major destruction of the buildings and lots of loss of life. Her session very closely matches what actually happened in Syria in August.
There's a lot of these. They're flying overhead. Some are hovering, kind of helicopter-like, I'm guessing. Some are moving a lot faster. You can feel the wind. You can hear the wind. Hearing a lot of, there's a lot of what is it? Popping or banging of some sort. I'm not sure if it's what it's coming from. Let me see. I don't know what that is. A lot of popping and banging, a lot of flying sounds, zooming past. It's very chaotic. This looks way too organized for what I'm seeing. It's very sporadic and chaotic. A lot of people everywhere. There seems to be moving structures on the ground. Are they attacking them? There seems to be what I am feeling a shooting of some sort going at both angles, going up, going down. I believe it's like they're attacking them. It's like it's a definite war zone feel here. There's lots of smoke coming from here. Something has landed in the city. There's I don't know if it's a truck, a box. I can't really tell what it is, but something landed here. There's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of chaos. You can see white or gray a whiter gray-ish. It's everywhere, kind of black. It's a very, very huge response that came from this. Before all of this, it was kind of quiet. A lot of commotion. People are coming from every angle. There's a lot of whizzing sounds. I'm assuming shooting. You can see the chaos is just starting. It gets worse and worse, and it spills out. This place kind of reminds me of the way a military base kind of is. I come from a military town, so it's very military-like.
Now, onto the session by Dick Allgaier. I initially wondered if Dick might have made some serious mistakes with his session, but as I mentioned, most of my early concerns were misplaced. Here is what happened. In the first half of his session, he describes wartime activity that closely matches what happened in Syria in a way that seems to parallel the accurate descriptions of Princess Genet in her session. His paper session for August is available on Farsight's website, and it also follows the parameters of the first half of Dick's video session. He even describes a crater that is very much like that found in the center of Aleppo, Syria. There were bombings in Aleppo, but the crater was not created by the wartime bombings. Nonetheless, it would be natural for a remote viewer to see the bombings and also the crater and to assume that they are related. But later in Dick's video session, he describes a scene that seems much more serious than that which we initially thought happened in Syria. He describes an object coming in from a high altitude and at high speed, hitting the ground in an urban area. It causes a huge explosion, a crater, the release of lots of particulate matter into the atmosphere, and the event seems to cause political leaders to make public statements. Now, here's the problem. It is so common with remote viewing for the viewers to obtain more information than the analysts initially have access to, causing the analysts to doubt some of the data. Whenever one analyzes remote viewing, it is essential to do thorough research into the target, and this often takes extra time and effort as we look to non-traditional sources of information. You see, it is common for mainstream news reports for an event to be very incomplete, and what the remote viewers perceive is actually more complete than that which appears in the news. This is what affected our initial evaluation of Dick's session. We initially did not see how his description of a missile attack matched what was reported in the news outlets that we were following for this project. After we published our initial evaluation of our summer results, we dug a bit deeper and obtained lots more information that came directly from the Russian Ministry of Defense. The Russian attacks in Syria against ISIS targets included both aerial bombings using traditional aircraft as well as cruise missiles. Now, the cruise missiles can achieve supersonic speeds. Their warheads weigh approximately 1,000 kilograms, and they create enormous heat and destructive force upon impact. It might have been that Dick was caught up a bit in the drama of the missile attacks and bombings, but that is to be expected when a remote viewer is on the ground, so to speak, at the target. The essence of his data was spot on with respect to what actually happened in Syria. Here is what we obtained about the Russian cruise missile attacks in Syria from the Russian Ministry of Defense. And then, watch how closely Dick's descriptions match the events that actually occurred. Remote viewing is so cool because you not only confirm what you already know, but you also find out new stuff.
Motion again, motion here, something, and motion shoots off. So a two-way motion. The sounds associated with this: a deep boom, loud boom, a concussive boom, temperatures, hot, smells, searing molten metal, acrid burning metal, ozone smells, textures, that shock wave, plasma, vapor, compressed air. So a pushing air texture. Let me see if I can get another a hiss and a booming rumble. Again, that loud, very loud, deep boom. Temperatures. Hot, 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 hot. Very hot right here. Searing, molten hot. Vaporized metal hot. I also get a texture of compressed air shock wave. The sense of there's a blast wave associated with that. Let me look again. Same thing. Sound, thunder, thunderous roar. Smell, vaporized metal. Welding type of smell, that smell of metal heating. It's got that certain distinct vaporized burning metal smell. Vaporized metal. Energetic motion downward. This would be hypersonic, supersonic. And the sound associated with this, the sounds that I heard, the hissing, sizzling shock wave sound, big burning, ripping air. This thing comes in supersonic, streaks in. There's a secondary kinetic energy, and I see energy comes this way and then comes out this way, expands here. There's land here. There's structures here. A grid work like a city. This is a pretty good size urban area with a lot of buildings, and one of them is domed. I'm not inferring that that's the U.S. Capitol, but there is a dome building. There's a lot of places that have dome buildings. There's bigger buildings here. Some of these are pretty tall. They've been impacted. I get a sense that the buildings have glass blown out. There's damage here. They're damaged by the shock wave. Actually, some of them are actually buckled. Enough force that there's buckling and structural damage to some of the taller buildings. Certainly glass blown out. That's where I got the shards of glass, blast wave that broke all the glass out of them. They're not so damaged over here, but there's an area of big damage right here.
So in summary, Daz hit a home run with his session describing an earthquake. Princess had an excellent session describing the wartime activities in Syria that involved attacks from the air on ISIS ground forces in urban areas. And Dick's session provided corroborating data as well as additional insight into the use of high-altitude Russian cruise missiles in Syria. Re-evaluating Dick's remote viewing session caused me to think more seriously about a possibility that I always worried about with respect to our Time Cross project. What if the U.S. military or some other military was watching our results closely, in part because they considered it possible that we could perceive something that they may be able to do something about? That indeed is the main reason for the military's interest in remote viewing in the first place. So if remote viewers see something the military does not want to happen, what if they activate their own resources to attempt to stop the event from happening? If they did find something, and if they prevented the event, they would not announce to anyone that they did this. This is possible, and we do not know how to prevent this from affecting our experiments. So as we continue with our Time Cross project, I have my own prediction. We will only be able to see if I'm correct by watching many more monthly episodes of Time Cross results. So far, our results have been remarkably good. But now, my prediction is this. For events that are caused by natural or political or social reasons, there is little national security agencies or anyone else could do to stop those events. So I predict that the Farsight remote viewers will normally be correct for those types of events. But for events involving high levels of national security interest, events with major levels of destruction, possible assassination attempts, and especially anything dealing with weapons of mass destruction, I expect that our remote viewers should still be able to perceive those events, but the events may not in fact happen. It is entirely plausible that some sort of official intervention could stop those events from happening. Everything else we should be able to get right, and that should be true for the vast majority of our monthly episodes. But events that would create a high level of national security interest might be stopped, and for those kind of events, our results would appear to be wrong. Whenever you bring information from the future back to the present, you open up the possibility that someone will use that information to redirect the future and change the events. And I do not know of any way to prevent that from happening, especially with events of national security interest. It does not appear to have happened yet in our Time Cross project, but I just want to put it on record that it is possible that this could happen in the future at some point. I hope you continue to watch the monthly results for Farsight's Time Cross project. As you know, we are offering our Time Cross project free to the public as a way of demonstrating the reality and potential of remote viewing, and as a fun way for everyone to follow a scientific experiment. It costs us a few $1,000s each month to do this, so your help by watching our Mysteries projects is the only thing that pays the bills. Go to our website to see information about those projects. Projects that include remote viewing investigations into the 9/11 events, the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, the psychology of Adolf Hitler, and some amazing explorations into extraterrestrial life. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channels. We have 2 YouTube channels, one for the serious science stuff, such as our Time Cross project, which is the FarsightPress channel, and the other for creative and behind-the-scene videos, which is the FarsightPrime channel. We're going to be starting a new Farsight vlog in October that will have lots of fun behind-the-scenes stuff, and that will appear in the FarsightPrime channel. So please subscribe to both of our YouTube channels if you want to closely follow our activities. So, stay ahead of the curve. Let the mainstream fade in the dust. Be there now.